Good morning. Welcome to our last event of Explorers of the Year. I'm your host, Jimena Perry, and I am happy to say that the Explorers has been very busy this year. Thanks for all of those who have followed our events. And today I have the privilege to have a very special event. And not only because the topic is very interesting, because also I have the privilege again to teach the students from Iona University this semester a little bit about Latin America. So we hope we enjoy I hope you enjoy this discussion. They're open for questions, but we are going to follow a script, some interventions, because there's a lot of them. Let's start. So I think the first intervention would be just you people introduce yourselves, tell us who you are, what's your major, and what did you think about Latin America before taking the class, your ideas, some kind of, I don't know, notion did you have before? So let's start with Ben.
All right, so how are you guys all doing? Thank you for everyone that came to hear us talk and present today. My name is Ben Filangeri. I'm a senior at Iona University. I'll be completing my bachelor's in history come this spring, and then I'll be going back one extra year to get my master's in education with the goals of becoming a history teacher. Some preconceived, notions that I had about Latin America before I started this class were, I feel like I started off pretty well compared to a lot of people. I hadn't taken a Latin American history class at the college level yet, but just as an overall history major, I know a lot about I knew a lot about like the conquistadors. I knew a good overview of some of the Latin American revolutions, but overall, I would say I still didn't have a good understanding of what Latin America was as a whole. And so like everything else that I'd pretty much information that I'd gained was more in line with what I'd seen on television when it comes to like Latin American culture, what I'd seen in television and movies, which can be a little deceiving, definitely, because a lot of those productions are, created from the aspect, that are from Americans. I'm sure they do a great job researching, but overall, everything that I had learned from more about modern Latin America was more based on what I'd seen in pop culture. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do you want to add something?
Okay.
Thank you, Ben. Let's go with Elizabeth.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Elizabeth Lancaster, and I'm a freshman here at Iona University. So I currently am undeclared for my major, but I'm thinking about going into accounting with a computer science minor. So obviously nothing to do with Latin America or history. I myself, I don't have any family from Latin America. I don't speak Spanish. So, and that when I in high school, I never got any modern Latin America in history. I learned some stuff about like pre-Columbus and around the time of Columbus, but I don't know anything about modern Latin America. Pretty much my entire idea of modern Latin America is through my close friend growing up who was Mexican, and so my idea of Latin America was probably very religious because she's Roman Catholic, and a big focus on cultural and family traditions. But that's mostly my conception through one person that I knew who was Mexican. So obviously that's not necessarily representative of the whole culture. And I would also say in the back of my mind, because you do hear about it on the news, like I did associate it a little bit with drug trafficking and human trafficking, because if you don't know anything and all you hear about is the news, that's what pops up in the news. You hear about, shows about Pablo Escobar, but other than that, that's pretty much what I came in with. I didn't really have much background. I didn't have any family background, and anything I knew was mostly just like what I had seen from my friend or from like various bits of the news, which are probably biased because they're American news and not, Latin American news. So I was kind of glad to take a class in this so I can actually get more familiar with it versus just like tidbits here and there.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Let's go with Shane.
Hey everyone, so my name's Shane Lynch. I'm currently a senior at Iona University. It's weird to say Iona University, not Iona College, but so I basically majored in political science, and I hadn't little to no higher academic level knowledge of Latin America before taking this particular class. While I was generally aware of the political histories of countries like of Cuba and so on, I can attest that I truly had no idea how complex the politics in Latin America was, is, and basically will continue to be. On a general level, I knew, that the dominant language in Latin America was obviously Spanish. I also knew that Catholicism and other forms of Christianity were quite prevalent in Latin America as well. When it came to like basically differentiating the specific countries of Latin America, I definitely used to kind of have a tendency to group sort of like Central American countries and South American countries together. I don't know if that makes sense. But after taking this class, I now see the differences like kind of between countries like say Guatemala and Honduras, or kind of like Honduras and Panama, like even though they're sort of close to each other, on economic, political, and cultural levels, they're all so different. Besides that, I learned a lot about, I'm going to talk about this later, but the liberal and conservative divide in Latin America, and I thought that was super interesting as well. I think that there's a lot of instability when it comes to the politics of Latin America, so that's all I got.
Thank you, Shane. Let's go with Mikel.
Hi, my name is Mikel and I'm from Barcelona, Spain. I'm here at Iona University studying international studies. And what I think about Latin America before taking this course is that Latin America, like I thought, it was like a violent and also an insecure place to live in general. Also, I knew that Latin America has marvelous landscapes, great biodiversity, and also plenty of life. And it's funny because like on the one hand, you have like these beautiful landscapes, these beautiful lines, places, like where you cannot find anywhere in the world. But at the same time, on the other hand, like you have like bad people, evil people populating it in return. Like it seems like it's a coin of two faces. So does not mean that in Latin America there is just like bad people, because I had the opportunity to travel to Guatemala, and there I met people with a bigger heart than the territory of Brazil, for example. So in addition, what I knew about Latin America is that there are like great singers there, such as, for example, Luis Miguel, Maná, Marc Anthony, Shakira, also great painters like Frida Kahlo, Fernando Botero, and immense writers as Gabriel García Márquez, Pablo Neruda, Mario Vargas Llosa, Juan Carlos Onetti, among others. So that was what I knew about Latin America before taking this course.
Just as a side note, Juan Carlos Onetti is one of my favorite writers, so that was the perfect answer, Mikel. Okay, let's go with Jonathan.
Hi, my name is Jonathan Mosquera. My major is business administration at Iona University. And before taking this class, I didn't really think much about Latin America. Since my major is business, I don't really have to take classes that were intertwined with Latin America, but this class was a very nice introduction to it. Before coming to this class, I thought Latin America was interesting because as a Caribbean, I'm from the Dominican Republic. So as a Caribbean person, we don't really know much about what happens in like our sister country. We know of them, but we don't really know about the politics, the people, the culture, and things such of such are about. Before I studied modern Latin America this semester, I didn't really know much about the culture as a whole. And basically, I took this class for two reasons. One was it was because of a requirement, and two was because it was interesting to learn about Latin America. Like there were other history classes, but I was more interested in Latin America, so I wanted to learn more about it. And also before this class, I wasn't really paying attention to the news, like live events happening in Latin America, because I wasn't really interested in hearing about it. But throughout the semester, we would talk about live events. So now I'm more interested in like talking about live events and reading about it. And I would say like the only Latin American country that I knew anything about beforehand was Ecuador, because I have many friends that are Ecuadorian, and I would learn like about their culture by going to family gatherings with them and eating their food and just like partying, listening to their music, more like that. And yeah, they taught me a lot about Ecuador, and I was happy to learn more about every other country in this class this semester.
Thank you, Jonathan. Frank?
Well, hi, good morning. My name is Frank Ramirez. I'm a senior at Iona University. I'm getting my bachelor's in adolescent education with a concentration in history. And so that's why I took this modern Latin America class. And before taking this class, I only knew a little bit about Latin America, nothing really about the economic and political aspects, as well as how complex like each individual country is with its people, geography, music. I only really thought of Latin America was just through like pop culture, like movies, video games. But I can say some of that stuff is pretty heavily biased on just like negative aspects and doesn't really show how like beautiful and complex and interesting like the whole combination of Latin America really is. So that's why I want to take this class to learn more about it.
Thank you, Frank. Anthony?
Hi, my name is Anthony Reyes. I'm a senior at Iona, and I am finishing up a criminal justice bachelor's degree in May. And basically, I took this course as an elective. I thought it had an interesting title to it. I said I'm a first generation Ecuadorian / Puerto Rican American here in the United States. And I pretty much just wanted to learn more about what the culture of Latin America is, despite having been somewhat well traveled around the region because I've been to a few countries, Ecuador, Colombia, Mexico, to name a few. And basically my preconceived notion from what I had seen and from what I had just learned on basically just from Wikipedia and stuff was that Latin America was a place full of corruption, poverty, environmental exploitation, violence, and basically what was shown to light by the media and things like that were all of these negative stereotypes. But and realities to some extent. But after seeing and actually studying the history through this course, I was able to get a different notion and say that it's probably, along with Africa and much of the developing world, one of the regions that has the most potential, both economically and socially, to that many of these countries are able to prosper in the future. And just due to natural resources and ways in which people and which newer generations in Latin America are having attainability to things like education and better opportunities nowadays.
Anthony, thank you. Before we continue, just also a side note, Anthony, I had the impression that you were one of the students who had like a more, that you knew what Latin America was about. I mean, I thought you were like in very good shape because you knew what was going on in some of the countries. So I mean, that was good also for the class. Your questions were also like very well informed. So great. Let's go with Max.
Everyone, my name is Maximilian Ruddy. I'm getting my major in political science and history, and I think really coming into this class, I think I had a lot of misconceptions. I was lucky in the fact that I did know about some overarching events and themes, but I think that myself and a lot of other people sort of fall victim to this sort of compartmentalization of Latin America, especially when it comes into things that kind of take up the American, sort of cultural sphere. I think politically, a lot of things come up with Latin America in terms of the immigration debate, and it sort of warps the image a little bit. Again, I was very lucky in that I could tell you about a couple things here and there, but in terms of like this interaction between sort of an Americanized, I don't know, like cultural, whatever, right? I could not tell you like, many very specific things about sort of the Latin American political environment and sort of their cultural environment. And again, I could really only speak in terms of overarching themes like, I'd say heavy Catholicism or, heavily religious, falls into sort of family values that's already been discussed a little bit. So I really couldn't, grasp any real specific things. I couldn't really flush out those examples, but this class was definitely informative. I definitely say I've shattered a lot of those misconceptions or preconceived notions, or at the very least, I have a lot more nuanced, view of the region sort of as a whole.
Thank you, Max. And Pablo.
Yeah, good morning. My name is Pablo Sagnier. I'm from Barcelona, Spain, and I am a transfer student. I'm currently taking my double degree in international relations here at Iona, as I already finished my low degree in Spain. And when I first started this subject, I was already pretty informed about Latin America because I've been luckily able to visit República Dominicana, and I was informed about its population and the culture they had. But what I thought in the beginning was that this was a very dangerous region, and with a very high crime ratio. I thought that they had different politics and also that they were more conservatives than how they actually are. And well, I also had in mind an image of a very unstructured Latin America where chaos was prime and where politicians were very corrupt. But as long as the course went through, I realized plenty, like such a big amount of things, good things that Latin America has, and I wasn't conscious, and I didn't realize that were there, such as landscapes, literature, and among other really beautiful things about its culture. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Thank you, Pablo. Yes, unfortunately, yes, but I think that happens with many other cultures that we don't know about. We have certain ideas in our heads, and then until we get to know a little bit, we realize that perhaps they're not so. Also, I remember mentioning the last one of the sessions we had that I emphasized like a lot of in conflicts, war, etc. But I also, because I think that's really important, but as you have mentioned also, Latin America is a very rich and complex region. There's many, many things going on. And as far as related to public history, that's also what our explorers also are interested in. This wasn't like a public history class per se, but I used, or at least I tried to use some of the tools that public history gives us to understand what's happening in Latin America in the present. But we will show that to you by the end of the intervention. So thank you, people. Let's go with our second question. After telling me this, and after having spending the whole semester talking about Latin America, did your perceptions about the region changed, were reinforced? Did you learn something new? What is your view of Latin America today compared to where you began? So let's go with Ben.
The easy question is I learned a ton in this class. Granted, like I said before, I had a little bit of background information from, high school and stuff like that. But what I really loved about this class was the fact that it wasn't a linear, well, in some aspects, it was a linear class in which we went, from year to year pretty much. But what I really loved was how Professor Perry had us do presentations every Thursday, which basically meant a student would be presenting on a specific topic related to Latin America. So we got the information on a bunch of different topics. And I would say all of them went into very good detail of giving us a general overview of what the topic was. I know I talked about women, women in Latin America. I know that we talked about music and other aspects of culture like that. And I was really grateful for that because it really helped me learn a lot. Overall, I would say my understanding of Latin America was completely shattered in this class. There are certain aspects like the political instability that definitely hold true to certain extents, and some problems with drug trafficking, like when we talked about Pablo Escobar. But there's also so much beauty in the culture of Latin America. But actually, I should stop saying Latin America, because Latin America is not just one big country. It's not one culture. Every single country has different aspects of culture. There are a lot of overlapping themes and a lot of similarities, but there's also a lot of differences, which I know isn't expressed a lot in American media and entertainment. When we think of Latin America, I feel like it's kind of everyone just lumped together, which is really unfair to those countries because they have so much to offer, like the rest of us. So overall, I think that was, I'm very grateful for this class because as someone, as a history major, someone who loves history, I love learning about different aspects of other cultures and other countries' interpersonal histories. And I definitely got that in that class. And I'm sure most of my classmates would also agree. So.
Thank you, Ben. I have to say about Ben's presentation for the people who don't know. Ben talked about women expeditionary and travelers during the 19th century. And I was very curious about that presentation because it was the first one of the semester and it was of woman by a guy. And I have to say that I was very, very, like, how can I say it? I was very surprised, but in a very good way. It was a great presentation because Ben took the time to, I don't know if I'm saying correctly, you may say if I'm wrong, Ben, but you took the time to try to think of those women and like to put in yourself like in their situation, and that made the presentation a really good one, and it was very enriching, and also that set the tone for the rest of the presentation. So thank you for that, Ben. Let's go with Elizabeth.
So I think my views of Latin America were probably, I didn't really have very many views to begin with. So I would say they're more expanded than changed. I mean, I still think that Latin America is very religious, although now maybe it's moving a little bit away from that. But there's a lot of things I learned, but I feel like one view that I think was definitely changed is when Americans talk about politics in Latin America, it's usually people kind of have the idea of like it's just a cut and dried situation, and you know it doesn't matter. It doesn't, like, they're just like, oh, this is how capitalism will fix everything, but that's not necessarily true. And one of the things I think I gained perspective on was the drug trade, and I think Latin America kind of gets a bad rap for being known for drugs and cocaine, especially. But when we were talking about that, one thing I learned, which I mean, maybe it's a common fact that everybody knows, but I just didn't know, was that all the cocaine in the world comes from 3 countries in Latin America: Colombia, Peru, and Bolivia. And that's part of the reason why Latin America is known for cocaine, because that's the only place it will grow. So if you had, say if you had like United States, like you could figure it out, you can grow the coca plant in Utah. Utah would be known for cocaine. So that's one thing. I feel like also there's a lot of like a discrepancy in wealth. Like there's rich elites, and then there's a lot of people who are poor, and the drug trade is very lucrative. So it's not just, now people involved in the drug trade are not just money grubbers, you know, they actually need to support their family. So and also even if the farmers wanted to stop, the drug cartels would probably wouldn't let them. So I realize this is a very specific example, but I feel like there's a lot of things like this that gave me perspective, especially as an American who reads, you know, American news, and American news is kind of like, well, this is what we think, and therefore that's the gospel truth, and that's not necessarily true. And Latin America is much more complex than you know, people just try to make it out to be. And there's a lot of, the politics are there's a lot of conflict, but it's not just, you know, as cut and dried as people try to make it out in America. So that's one aspect of something I learned. I mean, I learned other things, but I'm only 2 minutes, so that's
Thank
what I
you,
learned.
Elizabeth. Yes, thank you. Shane?
Okay, yeah, so I think my perception of Latin America basically definitely changed a lot after taking this class. For instance, I was sort of unaware about like the heavy-handed ways in which the United States interfered with the political affairs of Latin American nations, like during the Cold War. I was like aware of general interventions, say like in Cuba in the 1950s and 60s, and then in Nicaragua, and then also like Grenada in the 1980s. But more than that, I didn't really realize how much the United States was interfering kind of through basically all Latin American countries during that period. I guess beyond that, in general, like I learned a lot about the Cold War in this class in Latin America, and it could basically kind of be defined as more than a century of conflict between capitalist and socialist political alternatives, or kind of conversely as a 40-year period of US-Soviet competition that essentially had marked consequences for the region's political and economic evolution. Was kind of most intriguing to me was basically the ways and manners in which Cold War history in Latin America sort of intertwined with the already existing like liberal conservative debate that sort of, I guess, started in the revolutionary period. In many ways, like I feel that the United States definitely over-intervened in Latin America during the Cold War era, you know, by organizing coups against leftist leaders and also by promoting American corporate business interests. But if, you know, clandestine agencies like the CIA, the United States kind of had a longer view of Latin American history, maybe they would have realized that the fluctuations between liberal and conservative politics in Latin America is sort of par for the course and not representative of kind of Soviet intervention in the area. So there's some examples like Operation Condor and Operation PBS Success that definitely had long-term destabilizing effects, like in the region from a political perspective. But in my opinion, Latin America is still seeing these after effects today, and I think that's sort of an interesting point when it comes to whether, you know, if we talk about the pink tide, I think it's called, in the early 2000s, and then now it kind of seems like it's shifting. It was shifting right, and now it's shifting left, kind of again in places like Brazil. But I think it all kind of coincides with the liberal conservative debate, and then also how, you know, powers from around the world intervened aggressively, mostly us, the United States. So I think that's kind of all I have to say. But
Thank you, Shane. Miguel.
Okay, so my perceptions in general remains the same about the regarding the population that live in Latin America, but at the same time, like this course, like made me to understand that the life that people live in Latin America is not an easy life. Also, I have learned many new things, and above all, like at a historical level, the course has made me understand different or several episodes of their history. Like firstly, like in colonial times, people from Spain conquered Latin America, like Ponce de Leon, for example, to give examples, Francisco de Pizarro, Hernán Cortés, Álvaro Núñez Cabeza de Vaca, for example, they tried to conquer Latin America. Later, the wars of independence and the dictators and caudillos came as Juan Manuel de Rosas, Antonio de Padua, José Antonio Páez, among others. And then finally, the influence of the United States of America came to Latin America, which today persists in many of the countries of Latin America. So my view of Latin America now is that it has been a region that has been influenced by people coming from other countries. And it seems that the course of the countries in Latin America has been influenced or conditioned by these past episodes of the history. So like in this class, I learned to see Latin America with its virtues and its defects. And my current opinion is that Latin America could have been a great world power, but due to the influences it has, influences from other countries, it has not been able to exploit like its greatness, which remains hidden, I think.
Thank you, Miguel. Jonathan?
I don't really like have many views of Latin America beforehand. Like I didn't really have any, but like I knew that like they were considered, some of them were considered third world countries, if not all of them. And from this class, I actually learned a lot, whether it was from the lectures, documentaries, or even the seminars we had every week. There were many opportunities to learn in this class, and I feel like I learned a lot. And one thing that I guess could be intertwined with the first intervention that I didn't know about Latin America was how much that Latin Americans like disliked, or some countries disliked the United States. Like I beforehand, I really didn't know. I didn't know any of this. Like I feel like I should have known, but I didn't. And I had a different history class this semester as well. It was like a completely different topic. And they still talked about, like, it was about violence, and they talked about like what United States had done to like different countries. And I really didn't know how bad the United States was until I took that class. So, but that was off topic. But back to this question. One thing that I really liked was when we heard songs in this class. They weren't regular songs, but they songs that had meaning behind them. They were either talking about a specific Latin American country, or it was like the whole region as a whole. And I really like those some of the songs. Some things that I learned I probably should have already known, but I'm glad that I was able to get it in my head this time. My opinions for some topics of the class have changed. Like there were things I had a stance on before learning about it, before having a lesson about it, and then after the lesson, my opinions like changed or like went a different direction. And one example could be obviously about Pablo Escobar, because beforehand I knew of him, but I really didn't know like the details of everything that happened, what he was about. So beforehand, I just thought like he was a drug lord that cared nothing about nothing except like just making money. But like in the class, I learned that like with being the drug lord that cared about nothing except making money. Like he was also a very loving father, and he was actually a good family man, and he gave back to his community. And I found it surprising that many people back home still look up to him and admire him for what he did for them. My view of Latin America now is that there are many countries with different cultures and they're all unique. In the future, I would love to learn more about each individual country and where the futures might look like. And since taking this class, I am now more inclined to visit these countries and be exposed more to the cultures and the people in them.
Thank you, Jonathan. Frank?
Yeah, so like I said earlier, I really didn't have like too much like information or even like a stance to have on Latin America, but uh it was just so much, like everything I thought I knew about it completely changed. Like I said, there's like stereotypes of like corruption, poverty, drug trafficking, but from learning just from old political trends to new ones, liberal versus conservative debates, seeing how like there's such a progressive fight over there despite so much conflict. Like it's just an endless list of new stuff, like independence, fighting for that, women in Latin America, fights against femicide, revolutions, immigration. We learned about different people's stories coming to the States. They're just so powerful. We learned about Ray. He got deported to Guatemala. It was just insane. Abolition of slavery, the illicit economies that are there, fights for peace through guerrilla warfare. And just to have these people grown through such unique characteristics by fighting through interference from the United States and efforts to exploit Latin America, from corrupt politicians and people that fight through these events continuously, is like just shows me the true like culture and nature of these people, and it's amazing. And I think that that's my view of what Latin America came to be, is just how incredibly like tough-hardened these people are, and going like head on into these unique issues, and just how their culture is building behind them and just coming through and affecting everything and everyone behind.
Thank you, Frank. Just a little parenthesis. We have in our audience today Ángel del Valle. Ángel is from Guatemala. He's the director of the Holocaust Museum of Guatemala, and he's also a faithful follower of the explorers. And Frank was referring, Ángel, to a documentary. I told him of a Guatemalan man who was living in the state and was deported again to Guatemala. And it was a very powerful documentary. So that's the reference, but I just wanted you to know. And also we talked a lot about Guatemala during this class. So just for you to know.
Hello, everybody. Thank you.
So Frank and then Anthony.
So probably something that stood out to me the most within Latin America after completing this course was that Latin America, for example, a certain thing that impressed me was that a country like Chile, for example, we talked extensively about the Pinochet dictatorship in this class and things like that. They are very much taking strides and progress, like most, if not all, countries in Latin America, at recognizing their past and recognizing things that have gone that aren't negative, as akin to how the United States recognizes things like slavery and internment, and how countries like Germany will recognize and teach about the Holocaust, for example. And Chile is at the forefront of that and looks towards NGOs and public historians and different organizations in order to make that known. And in the case of my presentation that I had, which was on Afro-Latinos in Latin America, a lot of countries nowadays, even in their own like politics, are making strides towards representation of Afro-Latinos and indigenous Latin Americans to attain education, post-secondary especially, and even implement ways into which their story can be taught in the history and Latin American university history classrooms. So I thought that was just to tie in, that was something that I took away, and I was very impressed by this class. Almost, it's just a spark that I had like after taking this course.
Thank you, Anthony. Max?
Yeah, well, I'd say overall the class really, it reinforced sort of my perception of Latin America in some places, and it really kind of changed the other. And for a vast majority of it, really just kind of informed my opinion. We talked a lot about like sort of American interventions. My first presentation on the matter actually had to do with sort of America's involvement in the Cold War and its modern ramifications on the on the American immigration debate. And I thought that was fascinating from sort of the American political perspective, just because it really informs a lot of where why is this sort of an issue? Why is it like constantly talked up in the political sphere? And so we're talking about America's involvement in Central America during the 19th and 20th century really does sort of inform a lot of why we see it, I guess. And then sort of on the other in terms of culture, it definitely was more fleshed out. I would say that in a lot of ways, the Latin America's culture has become more diverse. I know way beautiful to me. You sort of see that resilience in a lot of these ways that they stood up against sort of these overarching themes, whether it's American imperialism or just internal conflicts. It is sort of inspiring to see the public history of the way that we remember the Pinochet regime. That was another sort of interesting issue to me, just because it's something that kind of had to be remembered. And then sort of thinking about, oh well, where America's involvement was. Again, it's just a lot of things that really did sort of inform me a lot, because again, before I could have maybe told you about it, but I really couldn't tell you sort of the purposes behind it. And then I think in other aspect too, my view of Latin America has just become a lot more nuanced in the sense that there is poverty and there's a lot of the things that you would associate very negatively with it. But at the same time, I see these sort of these bloomings of sort of unity and progress, and it really is good to see. I know there's a lot of faux conflict between like soccer matches or football matches or whatever, and all this other stuff, but at the end of the day, I see it as sort of, oh, they're coming together. There's these moments where we can see the unification. We can see sort of where these different cultures, where they kind of come together. So that's sort of my opinion on the subject now.
Thank you, Max. Just an update on the World Cup. Argentina went to the final. So I know I told you that I wasn't rooting for Argentina, but now I am, of course, because it's the only Latin American country left. So Pablo.
Yeah, thank you. My perceptions about the region has been totally reinforced compared with the image that I had in my mind before talking and studying about Latin American along this semester. I have learned several interesting events that happened in this continent, such as the feminicides and the women empowerment revolutions, which actually started such a long ago, and that was a thing that really got me like really impact. I didn't know it, and that started such a long time ago, and I think that's a really positive thing, but still is being reinforced. And well, I have also been able to understand all the problems that there were with the smuggling of drugs to the United States, as well as where it was produced and how it was introduced in the States. Another interesting topic we talked about has been the horror of slavery that Native Latin Americans had to go through. Also how it worked and which were like the roles in this situation. We also studied the colonialism from Portugal and Spain, and we took like a deep lecture into it. So it really helped me to understand how it really was. We also talk about migration. I still remember like this video we saw in class about these families who were struggling and having really bad times being separated. Also, the countries which this population was living behind, and like the issues that this carries. So I can surely say that now I have a very solid view of all Latin American countries. I can now distinguish and terminate some differences that exist in between all the countries that conform Latin America. So yeah, I'm sure that I can say that my vision is wiser and also more precise than how it used to be. So I'm really looking forward to traveling and visiting as many Latin American countries as I can in the future, be able to appreciate its beautiful landscapes and its people. And overall, I think that I was judging without knowing, but now I have a complete new vision and I feel proud for it. So thank you very much, Jimena.
Thank you. Thank you, Pablo. And I want to echo Pablo's words. I hope everybody gets the chance to visit and travel around the region as much as they can. So let's go with a question that it's a public history question that I told you about. So if today, right now, you had the chance to represent or to characterize the region, how would you do it? Would you choose a topic? Would you talk about it in general? How would you be able to, as I asked in the script, how would you talk or represent the region in a way that a 5-year-old can understand it? So let's go with Ben.
So I don't know how this would go with explaining it to a 5-year-old, but the word I would best use would probably be like unstable. That's more from a political standpoint. Something that I find really interesting about Latin America and also kind of upsetting is the fact that I'll rephrase. I'm not upsetting, but just interesting. When it comes to the Latin American revolutions that we saw in the late 19th century and throughout most of the 20th century, that still to a certain extent are continuing now, you see this cycle. You see there's a root cause, and then there's an uprising and a challenge to that cause, and more than not, the people of Latin America are successful and they get what they want. And the problem is, once the situation is solved, you see basically the same problems start again, and they kind of rinse and repeat. And I think that that's really unfortunate, and sadly it characterizes, in my opinion, I think it characterizes a lot of Latin American countries from a political standpoint. Granted, there are a lot of beautiful things about many Latin American countries, but just quickly comes to mind the Cuban Revolution, the Bolivian Revolution, everything that happened in Guatemala. You're obviously, you've seen progress, but sometimes these countries they fall back into that same cycle, and sadly you see it also because of American interference. Like you saw the banana republics has happened, Operation Condor, and I mean everything with Cuba, pretty much from the Bay of Pigs invasion all the way through the Cuban Missile Crisis. Cuba had rooted Fulgencio Batista from the island, and then Fidel Castro, he changed after he'd kind of gotten power, and then the influence from America was definitely not helping, especially with them trying to assassinate him every 10 seconds. So if I had to explain it to a 5-year-old, I would say it's been a cycle, but it's getting better, and I would hope it eventually it subsides. So
Thank you, Ben. Elizabeth.
So I would say that I'm not sure about how to explain to a 5-year-old, but I think one thing that people, or at least I kind of went up before I knew about Latin America, that Latin America is not the same thing as South America in this sense, because you have you can't characterize it by the physical region, because you've got French Guiana and the Falkland Islands, which are both colonies of other European countries. So it's not a unified physical region. You don't speak the same language. They speak French, and I believe in French Guiana, and they speak Portuguese in Brazil. So then you can't say that the entire region speaks one language. You can't characterize it by the same race of people, because you have lots of different backgrounds of ancestry, from indigenous people to the Spanish colonizers, and then you have the African slaves who then everybody is intermarried. So you can't say, if you were to see somebody from a European country, you might say somebody looks Italian, but you couldn't say that necessarily for someone in Latin America. So you can't really by a lot of normal standards when you characterize a country or region. You can't really do that with Latin America. So I think the sticking point would be culture. And I think there's, I mean, a lot of countries have different cultures, but I think one of the unifying things is an anti-American point of view. Like they're anti-capitalist, anti-American, anti-individualist, I think mostly because America is meddled too much in Latin American politics. So I think having a unified dislike towards America sort of is one of the ways you can kind of unify the region, because for like physical quantifications, you can't really do that as well as another region. So if I were to explain it to a 5-year-old, I'd probably say that it's a region unified by culture rather than by a geographic or qualitative measures.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Shane.
Yes, I think from like a public history standpoint, trying to explain Latin America to 5-year-olds is definitely a hard task. But there was, I remember, I can't remember the specific name of the video. It was a YouTube video that you showed us in class where it was one song sung by multiple singers in different parts of Latin America, kind of explaining the struggles of being Latin American, dealing with kind of, you know, Spanish influence in the beginning and then oppression over time. And then I think the song even went to, you know, I think it actually mentioned Operation Condor, which I thought was very interesting. It was very powerful. So I would say probably music and dance would be the best way to explain it to a 5-year-old. And in something in that format in the video we watched, I know it's hard to reference it, but I think everybody else kind of remembers it. I think it was pretty good. And then I think if you're like also just thinking about public history, if you're thinking about like maybe the Pinochet regime, I think we discussed this in class. You asked us a question how that should be represented. And I think my take on it was that the stadium, the national stadium, where basically he committed all of his crimes against, you know, people that were against his regime. I think that it should have been turned into like a world UNICEF memorial. I think that's the language. But and then you told me that it actually was a UNICEF World Heritage Site. That's what it's called. But I think on a higher level for people that are trying to remember kind of atrocities that were committed by borderline fascist regimes, that would be a good, you know, route to take. But for the kids, I would say music. So.
Thank you, Shane. Mikel?
Maybe I think that the song that Shane wanted to talk about is called Latin America from Calle 13, a beautiful song that defines Latin America. I really like it. About me, I would represent Latin America as a region full of color, abundance, nature, culture, history, and beauty. So I would also represent it as a region of joy, development, resilience, but suffering, violence, and pain. Latin America, as I said before, like it's a two-sided coin. On the one hand, we have beauty, and on the other hand, we have evil. So I would tell to this kid, like beauty can be represented by the number, for example, of a strong woman who have fought for Latin America, such as Juana Zurdin, Manuela Sainz, Frida Kahlo, Eva Perón, Carmen Mondragón, María Ignacia Rodríguez, among others. Also by the great things that Latin America has achieved, such as great commercial pacts during its history between European countries, also investment and development. Like this, in my opinion, I think it's like the greatest things that can be said to a 5-year-old child to understand a little bit. So, and also evil can be represented, on the other hand, by drug production and trafficking, the violence that has marked several severe episodes on its history, the disappearance of important people, the assassination of many politicians, the financial interest of the upper classes that have impoverished the working classes, among others. So it's a contrast region, I would say, and at the same time, it's a beautiful one that I will always give a chance.
Thank you, Mikel. Jonathan?
I would say if I had to represent the region, I would use memory museums to show all the good events that happened in the past. Even though that may be controversial because people say that the memory museum to show like the bad events should like have a bigger effect, but in my opinion, I would still use the good events to happen. And we talked about memory museums in a lesson and how they affect people who went to them, and I really like the idea. And then there were two types of memory museums: one where they graphically like show violence and terrible things that happened in the past to get you to feel and empathize with the people back then, and then there's one where they show the good events. And I would choose to only show the good events because I want people to see how Latin America as a whole is a beautiful place and it had many amazing things happen in the past. Another way I would represent it is by having like festivals or parades dedicated to a specific country, or like they can have like one day dedicated to, you know, like a festival or to like celebrate, I don't like anything, celebrate anything like I say independence, because when I was younger, I remember going to the Dominican Republic, and when I went, I don't know if it was planned, but when I went, it was Independence Day over there. So like there were parades and like loud music everywhere. And it was just like a lot of people enjoying their time, you know, having fun and then forgetting about the real life for a second just to enjoy the Day of Independence. And I don't know, I thought that was really like fun and happy to look back at. And I remember having a lot of fun that day. When I think back to it, I have a lot of good memories. And even though I was pretty young when I went, but like, I still remember a lot because of the good memories that you know I went through back then. And that's how I would represent Latin America, by making sure a person has good memories and, you know, knows the best things about Latin America.
Thank you, Jonathan. Frank?
So if I had to talk about the region or represent it, I would definitely talk about the music. And so a couple other students talked about the music and how professor would show us different music videos every week. And I think sometimes when there were lyrics, I would be reading the lyrics and I'm like, wow, this is actually pretty deep, despite like how good the music sounds. And then other times when there wasn't any lyrics, well, that I can't read the Spanish, but that you still just feel good throughout the music. But then when you learn like just how complex and deep it is, the stories they're trying to tell through it, I think it encapsulates Latin America pretty well. You know, it can't be language, it can't be race, politics are so different and varied. But telling it to a 5-year-old, I think that is pretty hard, but I do think music is a good way, because like I said, you could still feel good listening to the music that like we had they explained like the couple different countries that all came together to make the songs. It's very expressive, and I think it's good for like a young 5-year-old to just listen to the music, feel good, but then also maybe understand what the lyrics are talking about and realize it's a little bit more deeper than that.
Thank you, Frank. Anthony?
Sure. So echoing what Shane said, Latin America is pretty complex to explain to a 5-year-old, but my best, just to dumb it down pretty much, would be, and by no means dumb down, no disrespect, but basically a region who's diverse, both culturally, ethnically, racially, etc., and beautiful at the same time, because you have all these different landscapes, shorelines, geographic regions, art, culture, pretty much just a huge melting pot of just beautiful things that come to it, whose primary languages are Spanish or Portuguese in that sense. But through this diversity, it's like it paints a whole picture of that the region itself is a melting pot, and it's more than just basically a mishmash of people who speak Spanish and Portuguese. There's so much intricacy to it, like things that we even didn't speak in this class because of, like, we scratched the surface almost of Latin America, because there's so much to talk about, and you could really go like years on end and you would still have time left over to talk about like so many different things that actually engulf what Latin America is.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you, Anthony. Max?
I mean, look, I honestly don't think you could explain it to a 5-year-old. I mean, you know, a lot of us are in college, and, you know, as we sound, we barely can wrap our heads around it sometimes. But, if I did, I would probably say, probably teach them, maybe this is like a lesson in sort of when things are complicated. I'd say overall, Latin America's really made a lot of these like progressive things. And as we talked about, it is very diverse. They have had their own unique set of challenges. And I'd looked at some of those challenges and the way they sort of interacted with them to sort of, I guess, inform, what sort of Latin America really is about. We have, eyesores currently today. We still have, sort of the Cuban regime and the Venezuelan regime that still does, commit a lot of these human atrocities towards their people. But you couldn't say that necessarily represented Latin America, and that's why you'd say it's complicated, because then you could look to a place like Chile, a place that really came back from a former dictator and has really made itself sort of a a defining country in terms of Latin American progress, specifically economically. But overall, I would say, yes, there are at least many issues, but they're working through it. It's just sort of that progress. It's the fact that they're not there today, but they will be there tomorrow, and we know that. And I'd also like to point to sort of the way that Latin America kind of interacts with world leadership as well. Brazil uniquely has to deal with the Amazonian rainforest, as we know, and they have their own unique set of environmentalist policies, which they use in order to alleviate that problem. Whether or not they always fall through with it, under Bolsonaro, that was sort of a debate, but whether or not that's beside the point. It's the fact that they are sort of committing to that slow progress. And, progress at all, whether or not it's slow or fast, is something that I think we all like to see. And I think it really does sort of characterize Latin America as being a place that, is conducive of this progress, whether or not it's, external or internal or what factors they get over it and they get what they need to get done, I guess.
Thank you, Max. And Pablo?
Yeah. If I had to explain to a 5-year-old kid, boy, what Latin America is, I will say to him to imagine like there's 2 villages, and there's one of these villages which is supposed to be Spain or Portugal that goes to the other village, and it kind of mixes up into a melting point, in a melting pot, and there borns like a new civilization or a new village. So I could say that this is a really unified country or region, which it has been unified by history, as though they are the result of a mix of native and foreign colonizers. Also, that the language is a very representative item, as they all talk Spanish, as well as a lot of, well, except from some countries such as Brazil or Guyana, French Guiana, but also lots of other native languages, such as Quechua in Bolivia or Mapuche, Maya, Guarani, among other 420 native languages. Also, I think a main event that share all these countries is the love for sport. And in this country, the prime or the star sport is soccer. They have quite a lot of the best international soccer teams, such as Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay, Ecuador, among others. As we are actually witnessing, Argentina has arrived to the final match of the World Cup this 2022 in Qatar. So we will see what happens. And overall, they also have a very good culinary taste, which is recognized all over the world for being so diverse and exquisite. Me, myself, I've been able to try, for example, quesadillas in Mexico or piña coladas in República Dominicana, and I can assure its culinary taste is wonderful. Also, it has really amazing landscapes, which change extremely from the Amazonas jungle to the Caribbean white beaches to the amazing skiing paradise in Los Andes. So that's what I feel like Latin America is represented with.
Thank you. Thank you, guys, and Elizabeth. And last, I just for the last few minutes, I want to show the people who are going to see this video in their own time. I want to show them your posters. So I'm going to share them, but I want you to talk about your posters like in 2 words, like this was about this, and my objective was this, not as long as we did in the presentation. So let me share it. Give me a second, please. My God, I had them ready, and this happens all the time. Okay, give me a second, and I will share your posters. So I'm just gonna share them in the order they show in my computer, okay? Oh my God, I'm sorry about this. Are you seeing this?
We can see your screen, but
Yeah, we can see it.
Yeah.
Can you see the poster itself?
Oh, no,
No.
not the poster.
Oh.
No? Oh my God. I don't know what's happening. I'm so sorry about this. Let me try. What about this?
Yeah, we can see it.
Yeah, we can
Well,
see it.
I can see it.
Okay. So Jonathan, just in like 5 words, what's your poster about?
My poster is about bachata, and I wanted to choose it and talk about it because, you know, like there's a lot of like historical and amazing events that happen, but I wanted to like, you know, do a fun topic that was easy for me to understand, easy for me to talk about, and one that really like I really like admire, and like I like the music a lot, so I wanted to make the presentation about it.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna stop sharing this one and go to the other one, okay? Are you seeing my screen there or not?
Yes.
we can see the files, but we can't see the poster.
You cannot see the poster?
No, we just see your the folder.
Okay. I don't know why this is happening. I'm so sorry. Let me share. Let me see if I can do this in another way because, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry with you and with the audience.
Now I
So-
saw the poster, for example.
Well, yeah, whatever you just did, the poster showed up.
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah.
Goodness gracious. I'm so sorry about this. Do you see here the poster?
Yep.
Yes.
I don't know why the color didn't happen, but okay, it's a good poster anyway. Max, do you want to tell us about your poster?
Of course. So I just decided to talk about Brazil entering World War II. You know, I thought it was important because I think that world leadership's important. And I think it's sort of one of these watershed moments where Brazil and sort of Latin America as a whole really kind of came out into the world. You know, overall, I could tell you that the British Expeditionary Force, which is the focus of the presentation, performed very well. And it was it's something that Brazil did not have to do. So it really was sort of indicative of like their leadership in the world. You know, and it really does kind of remind us today of, you know, sort of how they have the pride and prestige in their country. So they want to sort of, you know, kind of bring that out into the world stage, I guess.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Max. Let me see. Now I'm going to share another one. I think I got it. Are you seeing the Colombian drug war?
Yes.
Okay, Max, I'm sorry, Frank.
All right, so I did the Colombian drug war, and I chose this because I recently did a presentation about the FARC peace agreements in 2016, and so this had a little bit to do with it, and it also just became a rabbit hole for me to dig deeper and just find out some new stuff going on in Colombia, and I thought it was super interesting with drug trafficking prevention and profit margins for drugs.
Thank you. Thank you, Frank. Okay, let me go with the other one. Are you seeing this? This is Miquel's.
Yeah. Well, my poster is about Eva Maria Duarte de Perón, okay, about Evita's trip to Spain. The main reason I took this I did this poster is because taking into account the international situation of the time, I thought it was important to talk about the topic. So in few words, like Spain was coming out of a civil war and the war was coming out of a world war, and Russia and the United States were entering to the Cold War. So thanks to the help of Argentina, which provided tons of wheat, corns, and food stuff in exchange for metals such as zinc, lead, mercury, and machinery for electric motors, Spain was afloat. Eva Perón's role during the trip to Spain was decisive for the international agreement to take place and for the two countries that started crucial commercial relations for that time. So furthermore, the fact that a woman like Eva Perón was ambassador of her country instead of her husband, in those times was an important fact for the history. So that's what I chose to describe the trip and the visit to Spain of Eva Perón.
Thank you, Mikel. Let's go with, I don't know why the colors are not showing up. That's something on my computer, but I assure you that they are great posters. Elizabeth.
Okay, so my poster, like we just saw, is also on Evita Peron, but I've mostly focused on her legacy and why she is remembered versus there's plenty of populists you could remember and talk about, but what made her legacy stick and the different factors behind that. I think part of the reason why modern day people know about her is because of a musical that was written about her, but then again, it's like Escobar, you have TV and movies about people, but that doesn't really mean that's actually who they are. And I think it's very interesting to see how someone who came like from a poor illegitimate child to an actress and the first lady and did all these great things and then died suddenly. And I think she's important to know about because she's unique for her time, I think, like we just heard from the other poster. But I was very struck by how she was very much loved compared to other populists at the time, and also she's still loved today, despite there's plenty of other populists who have come into the scene, done good things, and died, and any knowledge of them kind of died with them. So that's why I was interested in Evita Peron.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Let's go with, give me a second. Give me a second, please. Okay. Are you seeing this? Ben?
Yeah. Sorry, 1 second. Yeah, so I decided to do mine on the Cuban Missile Crisis. Obviously, as a history major, I very much have a calling to American history. But I wanted to take a concept that I knew about from one perspective and kind of tied into other aspects of Latin American history, especially considering that the Cuban Missile Crisis is the closest we've ever come to complete annihilation from nuclear war, and that a very controversial Latin American country, which had pretty much just risen to new power just a couple of years earlier in the Cuban Revolution, was right in the middle of it. So the way I wanted to set up this poster, and I'll be quick, is I just wanted to show the overall gist of the Cold War for someone who didn't know, but I also wanted to really focus on how Cuba had affected the Cold War, and how it had really ended up embroiling itself in this conflict. So,
thank you, Ben. Thank you, Ben. I don't know why some posters show with colors and others don't. But and this is Anthony.
So my poster was on the influence of Bad Bunny in Latin America, and he's a household name, not just in Latin America, but probably most parts of the world. And basically what I wanted to focus on this poster was the fact that he's a prime example nowadays of how music transcends cultures, transcends borders, and is very much a universal language, because there could be people both within Latin America, in the case of Portugal, many indigenous communities that may not know Spanish whatsoever. And even in the United States, first, second, third generation Latino Americans who don't who don't know Spanish, that they're just automatically attracted to Bad Bunny's music just because of how infectious the beat is and things like that. And even more so on a deeper extent, people who do have heard his music know that he is trying to unify and bring a voice to what's the new generation in Latin America in the case of things like the LGBTQ movement and championing against femicide in Latin America.
Thank you, Anthony. These colors are actually great. And there's 2 left. So, okay. Are you seeing this? This is Pablo's.
Yeah, it's mine. I can see it.
Okay, go Pablo.
Yeah, so with the elaboration of this academic poster, I have tried to illustrate the transition that took place in Latin America through the process of independence. To wrap up this topic, I think it's important to talk about it and let people know that like what really happened, since I consider this event like a really important historic event that marked the before and after in the life of millions of Latin Americans. So they went from suffering mistreatment and being subjected to a regime by the Spanish to being free and governed by their own people. I also feel that both in the United States and Europe, in my case, I am from Spain, from Europe, this is a topic that is hardly talked about and which people have no idea, and this should not be the case and should be given more importance than what is currently given. So in the poster, I talk about Simón Bolívar and José de San Martín as the mainly independence conquerors. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Thank you, Pablo. And the last one that also I don't know, Shane. I'm sorry, I don't know why some colors went away and others didn't. But you can also, but you can see the idea. Shane.
Okay, yeah. So my poster is basically just on United Fruit, which is now Chiquita Banana's collusion with the CIA, basically to overthrow a leftist dictator. Actually, he wasn't a dictator; he was democratic, but it just kind of speaks to the pervasive ways in which the United States have kind of interfered in Latin America, and in this case, it was for corporate interests.
Okay, I done.
Yeah, I guess that's enough. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. We went over the time a little bit, but I don't know if Angel or Maria or Luisa have any questions or any comments. If you don't, I just want to thank you guys and Elizabeth for taking this class. As an instructor, we always learn from our students, always. It's always the case. So the only thing I want to wish you is happy holidays, good end of the semester. And I also take the chance to tell the explorers that we will be on break until February. We will come back in February 1 with a presentation of Thomas Cauvin about his new book about public history. And next year, we're also going to have monthly events of the explorers. And to you guys, for those who are graduating, well, good luck in your future careers. And for those of you who are not graduating yet, good luck next semester, and I will see you around. Thank you very much.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Thank you very
Professor.
much, Professor.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.